going to continue in our series, Raising Black Children. We're actually a week behind. This was on the schedule for last week, so we're playing a little bit of catch up. And today's focus is going to be on the preschool age child. And some of the things that are discussed in this chapter definitely pertain to children above the preschool age, but that's the primary focus. So those of you that have the book, you know that these are some long chapters. There are a lot of different topics covered in each chapter. I think this particular chapter was somewhere close to 60 pages just on the preschool child. So within the time that we have, we're not going to be able to cover everything that was covered in the chapter, but we will highlight a few topics. And then at the end, I'll try to save some time if there's any topic that we didn't cover that you definitely want to address. Hopefully, there'll be a little bit of time that we can raise that. I would really like the discussion to be interactive. This is not a lecture. We're going to have a little bit of dialogue. Got some questions for you to ponder as we go through this, and just keep in mind that this is beneficial for us all. We don't have any preschool age children anymore, but we've got little cousins, we've got friends of the family. So that may be your situation as well, where you personally don't have any preschool children, but you can still help to be a mentor to a young child, or maybe to a parent in your life that has children this age. As we go through the book, there are a lot of topics in here that's covered. So Carlos, during his lesson last week, he talked about some things being, as it pertains to the Bible, some things being general and some things specific. And I think you'll find this as we continue to go through this book. There's some topics that are covered that are general, that could apply to any race of child. And then there's other things that are more specific to the Black child. So we'll start to uncover that a little bit as well. So first off, I know Verlin has the book. Does anybody else have their book yet?
The brown too.
You do? Okay, good. What about you,
Oh,
Brother Hunt?
no, I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay. All right. So I'm a lean on Brother Verlin and Lisa, if she's out there, and Sister Brown, to help me with the reading or the passages that we'll be covering today. So let's start off. Those of you that have your books, if you could turn to page 55. And we've got a few people coming in. Looks like we got the Smiths and Deacon Alfred. Good morning. For those of you that just joining, we are covering the preschool age child. We're in the book on page 55.
Good morning.
Good morning. How y'all doing?
We good and tired, but we good.
Hey, well, good. So I'm just so glad you joined us today. So starting on page 55, Deacon Fryer, could you read, starting at the top, the special problems of the 2-year-old, and go through the middle of the page on page 56?
Okay, this is Lisa.
Hey, Lisa. Good morning.
Hey, all right. Okay, why does my 2-year-old show so much frustration, fear, and anger? Your 2-year-old is the great pretender. He has just gotten his legs together and he knows a few words. He has begun to figure out that he is an individual. Now he wants to be and act just like you, big, strong, capable, and knowledgeable. But the truth is that he is a David without a slingshot or a rock in a land of Goliaths. He is only now learning to feed and clothe himself, to control his bowels and bladder. Every fall or mishap reminds him of how incapable he is. And too much help from you reminds him as well.
Mhm.
You are helping him explore his environment and protecting him from danger for his own good. But he doesn't understand that you must. That it's your job as a parent. You are his personal giant, frustrating and helping. He resents this and occasionally gets angry with you. He attacks you and sometimes tries to drive you away. At the same time, he is afraid that he may go too far. It's a case of not being able to get along with you or without you. His mind permits him to think that he can control the world or that you can control the world. Most of a child's thinking is magical and unrealistic. A stoplight turned red just as a father stepped off a curb, and all the cars stopped. His 2-year-old daughter said, "Do that again, Dad, do that again." With, with such thinking, it's easy to see why your child may think that his angry feelings can hurt people, including you. But you are his helpmate, the source of all his security. The great pretender knows deep down that he can't make it all by himself. He needs you. Yet he thinks he can hurt and lose you. Thus, fears and anxieties mark this age. Do I continue?
Yep. The next
Okay.
paragraph.
Okay. Is there any way to decrease these around two feelings of fearfulness and frustration? If you talk calmly to your child about what you expect, rather than lashing out at him, he will soon learn that you are not retaliating for his bad wishes. Through your firm but tolerant management of his anger and temper tantrums, he will gradually learn that his thoughts can't hurt. But be careful not to overprotect your child. If you respond anxiously to every fall and every cry, your behavior suggests that there is something to be afraid of. If he falls, gets up, survives a number of minor disasters, he gradually learns that the world is not too dangerous.
Thank you, Sister Lisa. So just wanted to have a little bit of commentary on that. So this was dealing with frustration, fear, and anger. Does anyone have any examples they'd like to share, maybe that they remember from their child going through this stage?
Yes, good morning. This is Sister Brown. I have my great niece, and she's 33 months,
Uh-huh.
and she'll be 3 in December. She has all of that. She is such a pretender and will cut up and do stuff she ain't got no business. And soon as she's done it, she wants, all this love and attention. But my expectation, no, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You did what I expect you to do. So I'm not going to fall into your pretending. I know you. And then, but I had to learn that, you know what I'm saying? Because I never met her. I only know the times that we met those once a week for like 9 months. And she's only been in a home for like 2 months. And then she does all these things that you don't want her to do, wouldn't expect she would do or whatever. But as soon as she hear the siren wailing or she hear the motor lawnmower, you scared to death. But you cut up. So I'm trying to like tie the two together. How you be so bad, but then you be so scary? So I'm not falling into your pretending. And this is real is what she's doing. Amen. Help me, y'all.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Brown. I figure you could relate since you had a little one at home.
Help me too.
Oh, y'all there, Reverend Brown?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Good
I
morning.
need y'all. Hey, I'm up early in the morning for this lesson.
Good. All right. Anybody else before we move on? All right. So then the next section that I wanted to cover was the aggression and the preschooler. So, Sister Brown, could you pick up on page 57, the bottom of page 57, and read through the middle of page 58?
So the bottom of page 57. All right.
Uh-huh.
Aggression and the preschooler. You said either that aggression can be, you said earlier that aggression can be healthy. How? Aggression in everyday language is interpreted to mean an unjust attack of some kind, ranging from a personal argument to large scale war. But at the same time, aggression is really a kind of life energy. It is very it is very much like gasoline. A spark put to gasoline on the ground can be destructive into everything nearby. But the gasoline in your fuel tank provides the energy necessary to run your car. Human beings need this energy to make their way in the world, but it must be modified and channeled, much like crude oil is refined and put in the gas tank. Whenever a young child is faced with the obstacle or problem, he attacks it with raw physical energy, aggression. If this response is not modified, conflicts and chaos result. Parents, caretakers, teachers, and others must help the young child gradually turn raw aggressive energy into the fuel for curiosity, determination, learning, work, and play. They must help the child modify, refine, and control his energy so that it can be used at a proper time and in ways in keeping with the rules of the society. Keep going.
Yep. Next paragraph.
The next one, okay. How far should physical aggression be allowed to go? Some parents feel that it is okay for children to destroy furniture or to attack other children as a healthy expression of their aggression. Hmm. A parent who feels this way must be prepared when others find Walter's or Doris' expression of aggression unacceptable. In fact, they won't welcome such an unruly child in their home. Amen. You shouldn't be offended if a parent tells her, Yusuf, and Alvina to hit Walter or Doris back. What you say? Who wants their children to be treated like punching bags, servants, or slaves? Children will learn where, how, and when to show their anger as soon as you make your expectations clear. Amen. They will learn that it's okay to display their tempers in the basement, outdoors, or in their room, but not in the living room. Ain't that right? The point is they need an outlet for aggressive behavior, and you should provide this opportunity under conditions that are acceptable for you and good for your child. But at the same time, children need guidelines, rules, and limits provided without undue anger and preaching. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Brown. So I wanted to have a little bit of discussion around this, around aggression, and just get some feedback as to what is your philosophy with allowing young children to express aggression.
Nip it in the bud. Soon as you see it, attack it. That's not right. Stop what you're doing. You're going to act like that. You're going to go to your room, time out, take whatever you being aggressive with. You know, when you see it, attack it. Nip it in the bud. That's how I grew up. But we got the hell beat out of us. But this one over here, you know, she on Facebook, so I can't walk.
Nip it, nip it, nip it.
Yeah, they can express aggression with a belt on their tail.
What'd you say, Jim?
I agree with you, Real.
There was a part about your child being bullied too, or your child being a bully, I guess is really how they're talking about it. Like, don't be surprised if another parent doesn't like the fact that your child is bullied. What do you say about that part?
Hey everyone. I think you have to well, I guess if you caught me before we had kids, my thoughts would be, yeah, kill them, nip them in the bud. That's where I grew up. But I've, as our kids have grown up, we at that age, if we're talking, up to, in that 2-year range, we quickly found out that each one of them were different. So one being aggressive versus another being passive, we first, we want to see how they intermingle, and but we found that we had to direct or give some direction to that aggression. Yes, for me growing up, the belt, no matter what, that was always the option. But now, that might not, at least for our kids, I found that wasn't always the best option, because the belt just didn't work on one of the kids. I'm like, okay, what else you got? Looking at you crazy. Uh, so instruction along with that, with nipping it in the bud, if we use that phrase, we found very helpful.
Man, thank you, Verl.
Yeah, don't let them be bullied. Yeah, and I guess to answer Carlos's question, yeah, we're not raising no punks around here, but we're not gonna push our way around either. So they need to understand it from both ends. So, which is why you let them spar just a little bit, so that they can.
What?
Lisa said
So that
something.
they can, know the difference between bullying and being rough, and at least those my thoughts.
What you say, Lise?
I said what? They have to spar? I don't agree with that. Just wanted to put that in there.
What's your philosophy, Lisa?
I don't know. Not the sparring.
Spar might not be the best word.
I don't know. I haven't really had to deal with that. I don't really think I've ever been in that situation, but we gotta figure out something else to do other than, I don't know. I guess fight back. I don't know. I'm just not a spar.
I didn't say
Let's
fight
talk it
back.
out.
I said spar.
Let's figure out what we can do. What are some diversions? What can we do to just kind of put the situation down or cool it down?
So the young, we got five. Y'all know we got five sons. Maybe the word spar, maybe. I got to be honest with you, Lisa. That didn't necessarily give me a shock, but what it looks like, maybe if I draw the picture of what it looks like is, and I'm looking at the sparrers right next to me, it looks like we call it shenanigans or wrestling. I mean, they just do that. Young men just do. I don't know about the young ladies. I want y'all to kind of chime in about that, but
Yes, they do.
we got a 24 to 22-year-old. They still roughhouse and wrestle and stuff like that. They just do that,
Good morning. This is Tamara.
Hey, Tamara.
Hey.
This is a really interesting conversation. I have a 6.5-year-old little girl, and although I would love to have just been able to talk her through her emotions and her aggression, what I'm finding out, well, one, I initially started out, I think like most of the people on the phone, with the spanking. Everything that happened, just kind of calm it down, nip it in the bud, stop that. It didn't work for her because she just got more emotional. And so then it would turn into a whole day of, just screaming and trying to get her back to level set, because that kind of ramped her up even more. So I had to find some other ways, and kind of talking her through whatever she was feeling was what seemed to work best. Why are you feeling that? What happened? Let's kind of figure out what you can do differently. And I also, I feel like most of the thoughts are about kind of within our own homes, but I'm having to deal with her dealing with other kids, right? At school, and even yesterday at a Jack and Jill event. And it's how the other kids are coming at her, teaching her how to deal with those things and her thoughts or emotions about the interactions. So although we would love to kind of dampen them and say, hey, when you're at home or when you're in these situations, here's kind of just bring it down very quickly. They can't always do that in other environments. And so we have to teach them the skills to be able to handle that wherever they happen to be, because they're not always with us.
Thank you, Tamara. That's very insightful. dealing with different circumstances, because not in every circumstance, even the authors of the book pointed out that whippings are not always the best answer. And sometimes it's more effective to talk to them or give them a temporary punishment. And they even talked about long punishments are not really impactful for small children of that age. So like to try to ground them for a week, after the first couple of hours, they forget what they're on punishment for. So there's very specific tactics that we have to use with preschool age children, and those tactics could be varied. It's not just the same thing all the time. It has to vary depending on the situation. So thank you for your insight there. Any other comments or questions before we move on from that topic?
And another thing I want to say about me and my situation, she's therapy twice a month. And so when she's playing with other children or whatever, of her same age, they speak, as they should. Some, already advanced, more than advanced, like my grandson. And I watch how she wants to control what he does. She wants him to, if he don't do what she's doing or want to play with the toy that she's playing with or whatever, she gets aggressive. She gets angry. So, and I tell my grandson, say to her, no, thank you, or you're not right now, or, to get her to like stop what she's doing or control. And then I watch her, like young lady said, it get more advanced. She escalate. She wants to start swinging out on my grandson, and he's 2 too. I said, Lord help me,
Right.
because I'm just like, where is it come from? Then I have to tell her, look, that's not nice. That's your cousin, you family. You got to love him, and you apologize, and you gonna give him a hug. And she do it right away. But I was like, that's not nice, or whatever they're playing with, I'll just take it. Say, you're not playing fair. It's not working. I'm going to take it for right now. And when you can get along and play. And my grandson, he just not understand, like, why she's, towards me. And I try to say it's because she can't communicate, what she's trying to do or what she's trying to say. So she just overpowers and say, you're going to do what I want you to do. And I'm like, Carlos, the girls got it too.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Carlos,
This
it's real. I'm totally different with the grandbabies and the great niece. I'm more aggressive to them. I've defined each one on what their problems are. One of them is my grandson, or my daughter's son. He's a con artist, and he's a bully, and trying to figure them both out. But my thing to them is I'm more when they get I'm a real aggressive with them, and I kind of like put some fear with that voice, in their lives, or that's my way of putting them, and not taking the belt to them, but and that's something that I went through as a child coming up, where my mom and dad was on the same page. It wasn't like the mom would tell me to do something, or the dad would do something to the mom would come and say, oh, baby, it's going to be all right. So it's got to be a team effort when you come to raising children, especially at that age. We as parents or grandparents got to be on the same page. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
This brother Hunt, even though me and Colleen, we don't have children, I think that raising there's a different way of raising little girls than there are little boys. Yes, both can be disciplined with the rod, and they can also be disciplined by word of mouth, because you can as you discipline them. But I think that you have to be careful with how you raising a little girl as how you raising a little boy. I think there's a different dynamic in doing that. But being that, like I said, I'm not an expert on it because we don't have any children. But yes, it's a very sensitive subject about raising kids and stuff, because they can be ruly, they can be, they can be disobedient, they can be, they can be con artists, as Brother Brown said, they can be a lot of things. But we must understand we're the parents.
Yeah.
And we have to know about the con artist part in the little children's relationship. We got to know, that the stubbornness. We have to know that anger. We have to fit. It's like we got to figure it out as parents, and then once we figure it out, then we got to lay the blueprint down on them.
Amen. Thank you for your feedback, Brother Hunt. Appreciate you. We had some robust discussion on that topic. I want to move on to the next subject, which is race and the preschooler. And in the book, they talked about a situation where your preschooler or a young child may come to you and ask about race, like they might ask, "Am I black?" or something around that line. So, in the book, they said, well, the authors advised that you should respond with a simple response like, "Yes, you're black, just like mommy and daddy." And if you show enthusiasm about the fact that you're black, your child will sense that being black must be something that's both positive and good. And they also mentioned in the book that if your child has never mentioned race by the time they're around 5 or so, then you might want to get proactive as a parent and introduce the concept of race to them. So I got a two-part question. You can either, for those of us that can remember, or maybe you've got children at home, how do you remember when your child first realized that they were black? Or maybe you could take it from a personal stance. How old were you when you first realized you were black? Talk to us about that experience. And then part two, what are some examples that we can take to introduce race to a preschool age child? So let's say by the time your child is 5 or 6, they haven't really said anything about race, or the question has never been broached, and you want to kind of start the discussion around race. What would be some things that you would do to introduce them to the subject of race?
I actually would like to tie it all together, specific to race, with the experience, the most recent I remember with my niece, since she's the youngest one I'm around. It didn't come up with "Am I black?" but being in daycare, she came home and was talking about how the kids always wanted to touch and pull her hair.
Mm.
Because her hair texture was different than theirs. And so the hair is what led to different people have different kind of, hair, different kind of skin. I remember me and my sister, because my sister was the kind that she was like, "What? Somebody pulling your hair?" My sister might be ready to spar. Oh, God. But, and I think back with my children, unfortunately, it came up at a young age, and it was usually around 5, and it was because they were encountering, at that age, already being called the N-word, or even teacher bias, where I remember my oldest was wanting to, in I think it was pre-K or kindergarten, in a music class, he wanted to offer up, because they had a day where they would recommend songs to sing, and he would raise his hand, and he never got called on it. I remember him specifically saying, "Why does the teacher call on all the white kids?" Now, when he decided, white versus black, but it led to, a lot of discussions, but it's probably because there had been a discussion earlier on. You guys were talking about aggression,
Right.
and I remember my mom And so I carried it on. I was growing up in California, and whenever we would go in the store, and I remember this, I was probably 3 or 4, I'd look at, say, the display case something was in, whatever store we were in, and she would always say, don't put your hands on that, or don't touch that. Then she'd have this elaborate story I'll never forget, because if somebody comes in and steals something at night and the cops come and they take fingerprints, they're going to see your fingerprints and come pick you up because they're going to think you were the one that was the thief. And I look back on that and think, wow, Mama, that was kind of extreme.
Right.
But it worked. I never touched stuff in the store. I didn't pick stuff up and handle stuff. Well, I say that because I fast forward, I was probably the same way. If they don't put your hands on people, these days you could be 3 years old and get charged with assault, or whatever. So I kind of had extremes early on, and I remember last thing specifically opening the front door, and when my youngest son was little, we would do this exercise. I would open the front door and say, "What is that outside?" And I had him rehearse, "That's the public." And we act one way in public, and we practice how to act in public at home. So, the oldest got more whoopings, the oldest 2, and the youngest said that he saw them getting whippings. So for him, it was more conversational and talking to him about everything. He wanted to know everything, starting very early: race, discipline, why adults act like they act. He asked all kinds of questions, still do. But, just in general, I agree with Verlin's original comment about each one being different. So you do have to handle things differently. But the central theme was I was always paranoid, knowing I was raising black males, that I was trying to prepare them for society, for the just in case. So it started with keep your hands to yourself.
Right. Amen. Thank you, Tanya. Anybody else care to comment on this one about when your child first realized they were Black? Or what are some examples that we can take to introduce them to race?
Yvonne, this is Tamara. It wasn't with my children, but I was raising my niece at the time, and we were living in Colorado. She was 3, and so she was in daycare during the day. I picked her up one afternoon, same route home, and about half the way home, she asked me what different meant. And I thought that was a pretty strange question, just kind of out of the blue. And I asked her why she was asking me that. And she said her teacher told her she was different that day. So I asked, kind of the circumstances around how that came up. And it turns out the girls were out playing in the sand pit, throwing the sand up and stuff, and sand got in everybody's hair. The teacher brought them back in and she lined all the girls up and brushed everybody's hair. Of course, my niece was the only Black kiddo. And so, but when my niece hopped in the line just like everybody else, and when she got to my niece, she said, "Well, I can't brush your hair." And my niece wanted to know why. And the teacher's explanation was, "Well, yours is different. You're different." And, so then sent all the girls all kind of off to do the rest of the day. So we made a U-turn and went back to the school to have a conversation about that. But that was when I think my niece realized that her skin tone made her different.
Right.
And we had to have several conversations around what different was and why that wasn't bad. But yeah, it comes out in a number of ways, but hair seems to be pretty common.
And how old was she at the time, Tamara?
She was 3.
Yeah.
I find it notable that we keep describing over and over situations where our children are in, sounds like, in predominantly white settings. And so I remember when our children, I always call it the second wave. Phoenix and Zion had the opportunity. They went to all Black schools, but Jade and Jared Chase went to schools that were predominantly white. And I'm just going to say, I was not equipped. I wish I would have had a primer like this one that we're having right now, but we didn't. And I just wasn't equipped for, we could speak on multiple situations, particularly in elementary school. I can remember one where this kid called one of my sons a nigger, and the principal swore that the kid didn't do it. And I remember having a conversation with the principal that went something like, "Listen, they're not going to lie about that. Like, no one wants to be othered. Now we use the term othered. No one wants to be othered like that, separated out. My child's not going to lie about being called that." And it just so happens that the next day or within the same a period of time, the same kid called him a retard, and they caught it on tape. And it was then that the principal believed it. But I just thought it notable that she didn't believe me or believe him before that time. I mean, and we ended up having a lawyer up and all this other stuff. I mean, this was like, this is a totally different world that we're subjecting ourselves to and subjecting our children to. And I think we would do well to just be, I mean, our eyes need to be very open to this. There is racial bias from teachers, and we need to best equip our children and ourselves to deal with it.
Yeah, I believe is racial. I believe there was, and you're right, Brother Young. But I believe that there was racial bias throughout the decades. And even growing up, I believe that our counterparts, a lot of them, unfortunately, raise their children to say those things, and raise their children to have that bias, even at a young age. I think it's so unfortunate, and that's the world that we live in. When it happens back in the the 20s, 30s, 40s, and here it is, 2021. That's not going to change, unfortunately. I really hate that. I dealt with it when I was a young kid. I moved into when I was young, our family moved into a predominantly white neighborhood.
Okay.
It was a few blacks that lived there, but we were asked. I was asked, well, why are you here? I was walking down the street, and some neighbors came to us, some white neighbors, and said, "Why are you here? This is predominantly white neighborhood, blah blah blah." And my stepfather, praise him, thank God for him. He was able to afford the home that we lived in Memphis, Tennessee, back in the days. And so they were just telling us, "Hey, you don't need to be here." And make a long story short, they had a dog, and they literally sicked their dog on me. I had to run.
Oh, no.
Had to run up the street to a neighbor of mine. I had that. So that bias, and that
Right.
it's in my system.
Right.
And I dealt with that as a young man. And so unfortunately, we're dealing with that today. That's being taught, and I really hate it. I hate that I call it living in two worlds.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's how things are, and that's just it's just something that we have to pray through and keep on moving.
Amen. Thank you, brother Hunt. Yes, unfortunately, that bias is just inherent in the system, and I'm sure I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Bro.
Yeah, it's something that I know is going to come up again in the future, especially as we move on with this book and talk about the older children. It's definitely inherent, especially in our school systems. I want to switch gears now and get into, because we still have a couple more topics to discuss before we end off. Now we're going to get into a much more grave and serious subject, in the chapter, which was dealing with sexual abuse of a young child. And I'd like for you to turn to the bottom of page 83. And let's see, I'll read this one. So at the very bottom of page 83, and we're talking about this because unfortunately, this is an issue that often starts when children are very young. And so we need to know how to protect our children against this. So at the bottom of page 83, it says, is sexual abuse a special problem? Yes, because not only must your child be protected against strangers, but also from friends, babysitters, recreation, organizational leaders, relatives, and in some cases, even the other spouse as well. Children should be told not to play secret games in which people ask them to do things that make them feel uncomfortable or touch them in private areas, vagina or penis. They should be reminded that this includes parents and other relatives. They should be told to try to get away from the situation if someone tries to touch or fondle them, and then tell you about it as soon as possible. If your child reports some kind of sexual abuse to you, it is important to listen to the child. Never refuse to believe your child. Cases of sexual abuse should be reported and help should be sought at a local clinic or hospital. When a relative or spouse is involved, a parent must protect the child by doing whatever is necessary: counseling, separation, even legal action. So, with this one, I will just say that we need to be very, very careful about who we have our children around. A lot of times we get comfortable with certain people, and I know, unfortunately, especially like with mothers who are not married, single moms that may be dating, they'll bring their boyfriends around their children, and sometimes will leave them unattended. But we need to really be careful that, to know that just one lapse in judgment from somebody that has ill wishes, and they can if they do something to that child can be scarred for life or suffer confusion about their sexual identity in cases where the abuse was perpetuated by someone of the same sex. So that would be my caution, is just be, especially with children that young, they're unable to defend and protect themselves, and we can never be too careful about who we allow to be around our children unattended. I'll pause there if anybody's got any comments they want to add.
I just want to add some stats, right? We want to always, everything that we're doing, we want to kind of tie it to what we're to do, which is to serve our community. So let's look at the stats as it relates to sexual assault. In 2015, Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, reported 18,636 assault cases. This involved 19,537 individual victims. I like that they're putting the numbers, because sometimes when you do percentages, it kind of takes away the humanity of it. These are the amount of people affected: 19,537 individuals in Texas. So this is right here at home, where most of the sexual assaults were women. 87% of the victims were female. And then a very alarming stat is that 83% of the assaults were by people that the victim knew. I want to say that again. According to DPS, 83.4% of victims knew the person who attacked them. And then one last stat for you: slightly more than 73% of sexual assaults take place at home or in the person's residence. So this is a very real, a very terrible situation that's going on. I want to give the number because this, who knows who might see this video, they may be in need. And the hotline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, is 1-800-656 4673. Again, that hotline is 1-800-656-4673.
Thank you, man. Was there any comment on that before we move on to the next
Well,
topic?
Yeah.
this is,
Go
I'll just
ahead.
share really quickly. This is Tamara, and I mentioned I have a 6-year-old little girl, so this is very real every day for us. I'm trying to make sure that she knows how to protect herself, to the degree she can. She's a 6-year-old little girl.
Right.
But we talk every day about, has anybody tried to touch you? Has anybody kind of, said anything to you out of the way? Because again, they're not always in our presence.
Right.
And I got a call right after her drum lesson this week. We were headed home and I got a call from the principal. It was a number I didn't know, but I answered it. I don't always, and the lady said, this is school. You probably wonder why I'm calling. But of course, and she was calling to tell me that I'm for trying to kiss her. And so, she talked through kind of what happened in the incident, and that, immediately Martin had to have a conversation with the principal, and, the conversation with the little boy and everything. And she was, kind of, I guess, congratulating the right thing, and, understanding what's supposed to happen, that, that's your body. Nobody gets to touch inside, outside, anything along those lines.
Right.
But I think it's always, it's a persistent, consistent conversation that you have to have to help them understand there's nobody that's close enough to them that they should be able to touch your body or to be able to violate you in any way, and explain very clearly what kinds of things those are. Because, maybe a peck on the cheek or, whatever doesn't seem to be a big deal.
Mhm.
But I am grateful that she understood that that was not something that was supposed to happen. So I think it's an everyday conversation we have to continue having.
Thank you, Tamara, and good coaching and mothering on your part to make her that self-aware. Verlin, you had something?
Yeah, to Tamara, you brought up exactly the point, or you heading in the direction I was going. So thank you for that. I want to take it back to the very beginning. What did we read? That they grow up wanting to be like us. So they're going to be observant. So when you kiss your wife or your spouse, or when they walk in on you and you are unaware, they want to be like you. So they're going to mimic your actions. So it is never. I think you have to figure out in what type of terms to talk to your children to, but it needs to be an everyday conversation, because let's not forget, kids are inquisitive. And again, they want to be like you, what they see being modeled at home.
Thank you, Deacon Fryer.
Amen.
Amen. So on the flip side of sexual abuse was another topic that was discussed in the book, and that is the child being exposed to a loving sexual relationship, which you kind of alluded to, Verlin, with regards to the open affection and kissing of your wife. But the specific example that was shared in the book is what happens if your young child walks in on you and your spouse while you're having sex. So, as adults, we try to keep private things behind closed doors. However, there might be an instance where you get a surprise visitor popping in your bedroom while you're in the middle of the act. So
I was surprised.
You forgot to lock the door or whatever. But how would you handle that situation if your child walked in on you?
I just want to say this. I walked in. This was, of course, I was a little tired back then, but I walked in on my mother, and I saw, and it. I was too young to be embarrassed, to know what embarrassment was and all of that. All I know is that the door was closed and I was looking for mama, and I opened the door and there they were. And a minute later, she comes out and she's upset with me. So I mean, I literally had that experience, and it was just, I mean, what can I say?
Sounds like it was sounds like it was traumatized for everybody. The book, Brother Hunt, I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know this much. The book did shed some light on something that I may not have thought about. The book, by the way, the book says you're to say mommy and daddy were making love, go back to your room. I think that's one way. To this day, all we say is we're sleeping. And typically the boys go away, so they don't never know if we in there having sex or not. We just say we sleeping. That typically makes them go away. But it's important to explain it. I didn't think about this part. I don't know about you, Yvonne. It's important to explain it because you don't want them, back to the kind of the sexual assault thing. You don't want them to think that they say playing house in the book. You don't want them to be playing house and think that they're gonna have some child intimacy with someone else or that is acceptable. So it is worth explaining.
Yeah, the book basically said that you need to be very clear that this is something that only adults do. And that should not be, because again, we already talked about this, how they try to emulate you or do like you do. So that guideline, that boundary needs to be set very clearly. Any other comments on this one? All right, we're moving on to the bottom of page 95, dealing with raising a fatherless child. And man, can I have you to read the bottom through the middle of page 96?
Absolutely. All right, raising a fatherless child. I'm on page 95 in the book. Raising a fatherless child. Can a child grow up to be healthy without a father? Yes, but whether a fatherless child, I don't like that word. I'm gonna stop that. I'm gonna stop myself right here. As someone who was called this coming up, look, no one's fatherless naturally, and we're all Christians. It takes a father to make a child, so no one, no one is fatherless. I think it would be better to say without having the father in the home. I just don't like that word, fatherless child. Okay. That being said, the child grows up to be healthy or not depends a great deal on the mother's ability to handle the problems that arise when a male partner is not present. Most mothers who work barely make enough money to support their families. Women who do not work and must depend on public support do not receive enough money to adequately care for their families. As a result, mothers who care for children without working males in the home spend a lot of time and energy worrying whether they are working or not. This makes it difficult to maintain a calm and confident attitude, which is so important in bringing up children. Support and help from family and friends can be helpful. State and federal programs that offer improved health care, daycare, and income benefits are needed.
Thank you. And so one thing I just wanted to raise about or bring up about raising a child without a father in the home is that it presents a great opportunity for our Black men that are doing positive things to step up and be role models, to help mentor, and it could start off right in your own families. So often when we think about mentorship, we think about going to a different school, but we've got single moms in our own families that have children that could benefit from your influence. So I was reading a statistic, and according to the CDC, about 70%
That's right.
70% of Black babies are born to unwed mothers.
Yes.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's no fatherly influence. It just means that the parents aren't married. But I would venture to say that I don't know what the exact percentage is, but a big chunk of that 70%, there's no fatherly influence at all. And so it presents a great opportunity for our positive brothers to step up and to help fill that gap with our single sisters. And then finally, I wanted to deal with the subject of adoption. That was one of the topics in the book at the bottom of page 103.
And one more thing, if I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to be more forceful on us brothers. Not only should we, but particularly as brothers of faith, we are mandated to do so. We are to help those, particularly in the neighborhoods where our churches sit. It is our responsibility to help those parents that are in need, those parents who are doing it alone, single mothers. This is something that we have to do a better job of, brothers. It's something where, I think about that junior high across the street from the church, and I know we're doing some things, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not doing nearly enough. So we should be so present in that junior high across from Wrightsville Church that they know us by first name. And that's my prayer is for us to get to that awakening, that type of community service as brothers and of course as sisters too. But I think the burden first is on us as brothers.
Amen. Thank you, man. All right, last topic, dealing with adoption. This is becoming an increasingly important topic in the Black community. We've dealt with it informally for years, especially as I mentioned, with the high rate of unwed mothers. In a lot of cases, you have situations where grandma is raising the child as her own, or I know back in the day, down south, if a girl got pregnant, sometimes she might be sent away and the child was raised as her sibling rather than her own child, or an aunt or uncle might step into the picture. So we've had situations with informal adoption, but even now is getting more increasingly that we're seeing cases of formal adoption, as we have a lot of sisters that are moving forward professionally and deciding for whatever reason to delay having children, or maybe they're not married but they still want the experience of being a mother, and so they decide to formally adopt a child. And in the book, they talked about this, and they talked about, what is the right age to talk to a child or to tell a child that they've been adopted. And so I don't know if anybody wants to comment on this. Maybe you've had experience about in terms of either adoption or taking in a family member, or you've seen it firsthand. But what would you say is the safe or the appropriate age to start telling the child that they were adopted?
Hi, this is Tamara again. I feel like this has just been all over me today. But I'm a single mom, and I adopted my older son, or my son. So 17 and a half years, well, actually almost 18 years ago, after a divorce, I decided I still wanted to be a mom. Didn't know if I was going to get married again. And so I went through all the training and the process to, be qualified to adopt. I was living in Georgia, and, had just started a kind of clerking job out of law school. And I got a call, said, hey, there's a baby at the hospital, 10 days old. And now he's my son, and has been since he's 10 days old. But nonetheless, it's funny because you get a lot of feedback. People thought I was being very selfish, which there probably is some of that in there, that I was being very selfish. The guy I was dating at the time thought, how could you take this child out of the system, when he could have a 2-parent household? And just not okay for you to do this as a single person. And then you get, the other side of the coin, great thing for you to do, to, take in this child or whatever.
Right.
I guess the thing for me was, I felt like it was just something I needed to do. Even when I was married, we had talked about, we had children of our own. I still wanted to adopt. It's just always been something in my heart to do.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as talking to him about being adopted, initially, because he was 10 days old when I picked him up from the hospital. So I thought, okay, he'll never have to know. I'll raise him as, mine and, change his name and all this great stuff. But because he was 10 days old and he was in the system, so to speak, it didn't turn out that way. 3 years in, we were still going back and forth to court. Mom would show up once a year and just enough to kind of keep it, alive, the case alive. I ended up meeting her parents, the dad's parents, just at court on and off. And we moved to Texas when I think he had just turned 2. We moved to Austin because I wanted to take a job and almost wasn't able to take that job because they weren't going to allow him to leave the state. But nonetheless, I bring up all of that because then we moved to Houston a year in when he was 3 and still going back and forth to court, having to travel to Georgia and doing stuff. But the adoption didn't go through until just before he was 4 years old here in Texas. But it's something called the interstate compact adoption. So, it's across the state lines and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had to have, his name on things at school and, in daycare and different places and everything by that time. So when I actually finalized the paperwork and wanted to officially change his name, he had to learn something new, right? So I had always been calling him that, and then paperwork had to change and said, so I really had no choice but to share with him things I didn't intend to share with him until he was much older. So he's always kind of known that he's adopted. He's 17 and a half now, and we still have the conversation at least twice a year or so. Does he want to know anything about, his birth parents? Because I have kept track of. His mom has since passed, but, and I have pictures of her and everything. So if he ever wants to know, he's always chosen to not. But I think whenever you feel like there is a question for them, then you have to fill in that gap because they know. I mean, it's just inherent somewhere in your mental process, that there's something that's different and you have to give them those answers.
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate your transparency, sharing your story.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you told him or you were open with him when he was around this age of being a preschooler, around the age of 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also kind of had to couple that with mommy chose you, right? Because,
Right.
If you tell them your parents went away, there's the almost immediate thought, wait, somebody didn't want me, right? No, mommy wants you, wanted you, loves you. And God put us together, right? So
That's
this
right.
is the mommy you have, and I'm really excited to be your mommy. So
That's right.
hopefully that's always kind of helped him not need that other piece, but if he ever does want.
So we are pretty much out of time. We're getting ready to wrap up. I appreciate the discussion. Thank you all for being so interactive and participatory today. I'm going to turn it over to Carlos to cover the logistics.
So logistics speaking, this is what's showing right now on the screen is our curriculum, if you will. And we're going to loosely follow it. We're a little bit off of it now as far as the dates, but in general, we're going to cover the book, right? So we just did the preschool ages, and then we're going to come back and do a little bit more. We're going to do the school age next. Then comes an overview. Then comes the school age child, and then we're going to stay in adolescence for a little while because I just have a feeling that's that's probably where a lot of our help is going to be needed. We will, or we may or may not be able to cover the biblical references for each, but just so you know, it just follows in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. It just follows right along Sunday to Sunday. Our aim is to tie the the biblical with the book. Today we did more book than biblical. We're just, hey y'all, just be patient with us. We're trying to figure out what works the best here. I do appreciate Yvonne. I've been talking about it. She felt like we need to have more discussion on the book. I think this worked really well. If this worked well for you, let us know. We just want to make this the best discussion about raising Black children that we can possibly have. Thank you so much. Another word of logistics is, as we always say, are there any visitors on the line that want to be recognized? Anyone that's their first time? Okay, everybody's family. That's fantastic. Just want to make a word. This is, of course, the 3-Strand Marriage Ministry, but the most important word there is ministry, which is we're serving you. We're here to serve you. We're here to serve people, all people, married, unmarried, men, women. This is a safe place to have discussions. The discussion that we're having right now is raising Black children. So if there's anyone else in your circles that you would think that would benefit from this, let them know this is a safe place. This is a judgment-free zone. We're not coming here to judge you on how you're parenting or not. We're just here to use this book and learn together. Next thing as far as logistics is, let me ask, are there any prayer requests or any answers to prayer that you want to share with us?